Okay, so I'm going to talk about another song today, and I think I mentioned in the first one of these I did that there is kind of a liturgical aspect to uh, country music in the way that it is not only in the way that it has a certain formula that it'll tend to follow and things like that, but that there's a liturgical calendar that has different readings and different themes that go out through the years and also for various different parts of life. And I think in country music you can definitely find this, that you will find multiple songs that cover a similar theme, and some of them are the more common ones about like uh, breakups and relationships and falling in love and then falling out of love, and there is that sort of tragic aspect to country music. um, but also there's songs, there's songs about weddings. There's some country songs that are routinely used by people in weddings or like in wedding videos and things like that um, because they're consistently writing songs that are very specifically themed around these real aspects of life. And of course, one of the biggest tragic uh, subjects that people need to deal with is the topic of death. And there is a lot of country music that deals with that subject in various forms. Like, for instance, the song Drive was not so much about death, but it was a memorial in honor of somebody who passed away. Um, that was the kind of the the final realization of what happens in the song "He Stopped Loving Her Today," was that he had died. But just also just many songs about people dealing with loss and things like that. And I think that it's very important for people to have things like that. And it's hard, almost in a sense. I think this is an area where like country music, somewhat adjacent to religious music, or like it's adjacent to the Christian faith, will have songs that are about our hope in resurrection and things like that. But there are not many hymns necessarily or Christian songs written about that necessarily help people cope with like the now what do I do now that somebody has died, and processing those emotions and those things like that. Um, and I think there are, of course, things in many things in Scripture that help people through that, and especially in places like the Psalms and things like that. But in the day to day, I think that like for many people, if they were to turn on a Christian music station or even deliberately try to seek out Christian music about like in the wake of having a loved one pass away, chances are most of what they would find would leave them feeling mm, a, it would be a disconnect with the emotional uh, with the weight of that experience. There just tends to be a little bit more of a, it's not they don't they we don't write songs like that. It doesn't seem like it's appropriate, whether it's for a corporate worship environment or for personal enjoyment. I mean, I'm sure there probably are some out there. I know there definitely are, but it's kind of like it's Christian music will allow the sad song, but it doesn't want to lean into it like country music can. And so I think that these sad songs are very helpful for people. And one of the really interesting things is if you go on YouTube and look at the comments that people will leave, and not songs about death for sure, and also songs about things like divorce and all this. Like there's so much rawness there of people sharing their feelings. You know, I would say especially if you go to the one that's got the most hits, the official video, that will give you the most comments to look at. And I did this the other day on some. It was pretty interesting. Um, but uh, but even a lot of the covers, people are, why would somebody choose to cover a song? Because it has a significance to them. It has an emotional significance, and they have a connection to it. So today I'm going to talk about a song called "Holes in the Floor of Heaven." The song is by Steve Wariner, and do this version from a guy named Kevin Thomas, and he's got very few subscribers. So if anybody sees this and likes his music, you should subscribe. Um, but you know, he does a good job singing the song, and um, there's it's kind of, I don't know how to put it. It's a song that well, we'll go through it, but it takes you on a progression where it starts from a place where probably the majority of people can relate, and then takes you into further layers of experience where you may not experience it exactly, but you can empathize with the singer as he's going through it. And you know, I would say this is one where it's like, theologically, is this accurate or whatever? We don't know, but I think very few people can really stand to live in a sort of way thinking like that our deceased relatives have no connection to our current life whatsoever. You know, unfortunately, I think that that's probably an area where like a materialist would have to say, my parents died, they simply stopped existing, so there's really nothing that they did at this point matters, because it's just part of the past. And of course, when your actual relatives passed away, you really don't want to think that that's the case. We are all much more comforted in believing that they go on in some way, which of course is the Christian hope, and I would say even just the hope of most religiously minded people, anybody except for the real true skeptic. You know, there's just this innate sense that we believe that physical death does not mean the end of someone's existence. But of course, it does mean an end to our ability to see them, to touch them, to hug them, to have them in our life, to hear their voice. And so that there is, while we have that hope, there is great sadness whenever someone passes away. And so rather than downplaying that sadness, you know, like having just the celebration of life, it's good. It's good to lean into that sadness for a bit. And this is a really great song that I think undoubtedly has helped many people. And it's really well written, and it's a good example of storytelling. And you know, it just exemplifies like what I would say is a well written country music song. So here we go.
One day shining 8 years old, when Grandma passed away, I was a broken-hearted little boy, blowing out that birthday cake.
All right. So he's day before his birthday, 8 years old. His grandma passed away. So right there, that is that's a tragic thing, you know, for a child to have a grandparent pass away when they're that young. But it's certainly not uncommon. You know, obviously for most of us, if we're lucky, the first experience that we have with human death will probably be our grandparents. And if they live, while, you know, if we get to enjoy them into adulthood or young adulthood, you know, that's so much the better. Hopefully, if you have that if you're lucky to have had such an experience, hopefully you take advantage of that. But unfortunately, sometimes you don't have that, and you can be a kid and a grandparent can pass away. I think I was 15 when my grandfather passed away, my dad's dad, and that was the first grandparent that I lost. And they've all passed on subsequently, but that even then was kind of like, it's a strange time. You don't know how you're supposed to process this, and um, you know, uh, certainly thinking about like, oh, it's the day before his birthday. That's going to put a damper on things, and obviously, especially thinking about like that kid's parents, they're in a position of like, we can't cancel our son's birthday party, um, but there, there's just going to be a cloudy cover over it, and then he exemplifies that in the physical description of the weather.
How I cried when the sky let go with the cold and lonesome rain. Mama smiled, said, "Don't be sad, child. Grandma's watching you today."
So there, he's saying it started to rain, and this was the boy cried, and for an 8-year-old, I'd say that's pretty realistic. When you get a little bit older, maybe you're not going to have the same emotional response, but that's definitely, for a kid at that age, and especially honestly, most kids end up crying at their birthday party anyway. It's just a weird. I think that's part of the weird expectations that we put on birthdays. When you're a kid, it honestly makes it harder to enjoy them if things don't go right. And so, if there's some tragedy, that's gonna kind of ruin things. But the mom is reassuring the son, "Don't be sad. Grandma's watching you today." And then we get to the chorus.
And there's holes in the floor of heaven, and the tears are pouring down. That's how you know she's watching, wishing she could be here now.
So, actually, thinking, that is kind of the biblical description where it talks about God opening the windows of heaven and rains coming down and things like that. But what's the mom doing? She's comforting the child and saying, "Hey, the rain, that's grandma's tears." And she's connecting a visceral experience of, hey, this is what rain means. This is the spiritual significance of rain, um, and this is why it happens. To an 8-year-old kid or whatever, this is fine way to explain it. And then that's how you know she's watching. She's looking at you through those holes, wishing she could be there.
And sometimes if you're lonely, just remember she can see. There's holes in the floor of heaven, and she's watching over you and me.
So, um, so if you're lonely, she can see you. Remember, and I want her saying, "There's holes in the floor of heaven. She's watching over you and me." If this is the mom speaking out, it's kind of implying this must have been the mom's mom that's passed away, and that's a very typical mom-like thing to put her own grief on the back burner, for the sake of her child, to comfort her child. That's uh, definitely something that a good mom would do. And here's the next verse.
Seasons come, seasons go, nothing stays the same. I grew up, fell in love, met a girl who took my name.
So there you go. Seasons come and seasons go. Nothing stays the same. It's just giving us the passage of time. Growing up, met a girl who took my name. So obviously, it's the young boy. Now he's grown up. He's married. And keep going.
Year by year, we made a life in the sleepy little town. I thought we'd grow old together. Lord, I sure do miss her now.
So just in that little line there, he implies, of course, in the story, he thought that they would grow old together. Lord, I sure do miss her now. So this is clearly, um, an indication that his wife's passed away now, not, and tragically so. Um, and if you look at the official video or whatever, they kind of have some shadow imagery on the wall. I'm not going to pull it up because that's what that's what keeps getting blocked every time I try to do this. Is they really don't like it if you use the visualizations apparently from the official videos. Um, but you can watch it and you can kind of see they do everything through like shadows on the wall, kind of showing the different elements of the story. But just that's like what a way to imply that it's like he's like he doesn't even want to. It's like he doesn't bring himself to state clearly my wife passed away. He's just saying I thought we'd grow old together. I miss her. Lord, I sure do miss her now.
But there's holes in the floor of heaven, and the tears are pouring down. That's how you know she's watching, wishing she could be here now. And sometimes when I'm lonely, I remember she can see. There's holes in the floor of heaven, and she's watching over you and me.
So um, the the chorus is the same words, but of course now it's a husband singing singing the words and thinking of his wife that's passed on, and the you and me implies someone else. And of course, if you look in the video, they show a little. You find out in the next verse anyway. But there's a little picture of a crib rocking back and forth while the dad's crying on the ground, and so he's raising a child on his own on here, and that's the you and me, and it's the same kind of thing. On the one hand, it's like maybe somewhere in between that first verse about his grandma and now he kind of realizes, yeah, mom said this thing about like, oh, the tears are grandma's, the raindrops are grandma's tears, and maybe like I talked about in the other one, like there is a sort of a cycle from enchantment to disenchantment into adulthood. But then once you become a parent, your world becomes re-enchanted because you have to live things through their life. You have to live through their life and to empathize with them in some certain way. And um, so now he's in a point of probably believing it more than he ever has on the one level, because he doesn't want to think like my wife's just gone and she's just not a partner anymore. Like this is why people don't just if they have a special relationship with someone, we look down on them if they turn around and end up with somebody else the next day. And especially if a spouse passes away, like it's natural that there is going to be a period of time before somebody's comfortable moving on from that. But of course, he's got that experience from when he was a kid, and it was a grandma, which was more more the normal thing, to lose a grandparent. But now he's talking to his own uh, kid who's lost their mom, and he's using that same wisdom to help his child to identify um, a negative, what many of us think of as a negative experience, like a rainy day, bad weather, and to remember that no, this is a sign that you had a mom that loved you so much. Here's the last verse.
Well, my little girl is 23. I walk her down the aisle. It's a shame her mom can't be here to see her lovely smile. They throw the rice, I catch her eye as the rain starts coming down. She takes my hand and says, Daddy, don't be sad, 'cause I know Mama's watching now.
Okay, so now we have the fullness of the story. So now his daughter's grown up. She's getting married. He's there to walk her down the aisle like a dad's supposed to be, but her mom's not there. And then it starts to rain, and you know, instead of this is supposed to be her happiest day, getting married, and she's there and saying, "Daddy, don't be sad, because I know Mama's watching right now." So she's now comforting him, and then we sing the chorus one more time.
'Cause there's holes in the floor of heaven, and the tears are pouring down. That's how you know she's a watching, wishing she could be here now. Sometimes when I'm lonely, I remember she can see. There's holes in the floor of heaven, and she's watching over you and me. Watching over you and me.
So there you go. So that's pretty much the song there. So it's the same thing, but then in the final chorus, of course, it's the daughter um, reassuring the dad. And I remember because when I first heard this song, it really stuck out to me because my wife's mom had passed away before we started dating. I had gotten to meet her a few times. We had worked together. We were friends a little bit, um, but it was really after that happened that we got together, and of course that kind of affects everything, because all the happy moments of her getting married, of us having kids, and all these things, there's always that just realization that there's another grandma that should be there. So and in some sense, that's like we even had to have a talk about with our kids, like there's this picture in our house, and that's the grandma that's in heaven that you didn't get to meet. And so anyway, obviously the song does what it's supposed to do, and I think um, it's good. It's good to have strong feelings around these things. We're often far too just loose with our you know we think of music as entertainment, and therefore we get offended when it's not always fun. But it's a powerful tool, and it's something that we can use to really cope with these sorts of things. And I think that maybe you don't know the words to say to somebody when something tragic happens, but if you could share a song with them, that's um, that's a powerful thing to do. It's probably better than better than a greeting card or something, you know? So I think that it's good to be aware of these things, and country music has a uh, great resource in these sorts of materials, songs that cover a much broader spectrum of things that happen in real life than other genres of music, and that's really one of its strengths. So, just say once again, thank you to Kevin Thomas for um, doing a good version of that song and singing it really beautifully, and um, check that out. But also go watch the real video, the Steve Wariner video, because it has some nice visualizations that really help to flesh out the story. All right. Thank you for listening.